Hey, true believers. Today we're going over Classic X-Men issue 35, which in actuality is Uncanny X-Men 129. I felt it impertinent to go over this book after what I talked about with X Factor number 9 having no depth to it whatsoever, being cutesy, and just really no substance. This issue, on the other hand, both the main story, and I've said this before, but in the Classic X-Men books, they would, when they reprinted it, they would add kind of a backstory. And what do I mean by that? We'll get into it in a moment. The original 129 issue, this is Chris Claremont writing, John Byrne doing the art, Terry Austin inks, Tom Orzechowski doing the lettering, and Bob Sharen doing the colors. And then the follow-up story called Paper, Not Paper, this is Daryl Edelman doing the writing, John Bolton artist, Joe Rosen letters, and Glennis Oliver colors. So I'm glad that when they go back and do the follow-up stories, a lot of the original people from the X-Men days come back and do the art. So what do I mean by how does this have depth? Well, first off, if you remember, the first appearance of the Phoenix Force was Uncanny X-Men 101, which kind of started the Phoenix Saga. This was kind of the kickoff of the Dark Phoenix Saga. And right in the midst of writing this big, tragic opera of Jean Grey, right in the middle of it, we get the first appearance of Kitty Pryde, Emma Frost, the Hellfire Club, and then the following issue, we got Dazzler. So it was just like bam, bam, rapid fire, excellent issue after excellent issue. And at the heart of it, right after the big event of Proteus, because here it starts off on Muir Island, everyone's saying their goodbyes. Cyclops is asking, Sean if he wants to come back and be Banshee, and Banshee's saying that his vocal cords are still destroyed, and he wants to be there for Moira because he says, when we destroyed Proteus, Moira lost a son and her husband. She knows we had no choice, but still, that kind of hurt goes deep. She'll be a long time recovering, and she can't do it alone. He asks Jamie Madrox, and Jamie's just like, I appreciate it, but no. He's like, I'm going to stay here on the Muir Island and help Sean and Moira run the lab. He asks Havoc and Polaris, and Alex goes, I'm sorry too, Scott. As Havoc and Polaris, we may be superpowered mutants, but Alex Summers and Lorna Dane aren't X-Men. If you ever need us, just call and we'll come running. But otherwise, we want to live as normal a life as possible. And then as they leave, Colossus is questioning if it was right to kill Proteus, and he's just torn up inside with the type of moral upbringing that he had in Soviet Russia. And then the main meat and potatoes of the story happen. We are introduced to Jason Weingart and how he's been secretly manipulating Jean to make her his. I'm merely giving her a taste of some of her innermost forbidden needs and desires. Within her angel soul, as in all our souls, lurks a devil, a yang counterpart to the surface, yin. And check this out, guys. We're on page 4. Nowhere has there been, what do you want to get for lunch? I don't know. Maybe takeout. I'm all ears. I'm all eyes. That's right there. Page 4. We have moral strugglings. We get the established villain who knows how to manipulate. We see Jean torn between her allegiance to Cyclops, and then as we go into the next part of the story, how Weingart is making Jean thinking that she's slipping in between time because he wants to make her his. He wants to make her the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club. And she just doesn't know she's questioning what's reality. And she clings to Scott. And even though they have some rifts in their relationship here after what happened in, I think it was X-Men 113, when there was an explosion in a volcano, and half the team thought they were dead. The other half came back and told Xavier that the team was dead, etc., so forth. So that's a whole nother thing. But here, as you're reading, again, this goes back to the documentary I watched on Amazon. I'm not 100% sure if it's still on Amazon, and I saw it was free on YouTube for a while. It's called Chris Claremont's X-Men. And he was talking about how when it comes to the teams, you focus on their lives. Because when you read it, you're reading the adventures of their lives. The action and everything else is just icing on top. And if you go back and you read Claremont's run, it very much read like a soapbox opera, but it wasn't corny like Days of Our Lives. You know, there were stakes, there was depth, there was philosophy. And here, let me kind of give you an example. So the X-Men are returning to the mansion. Cyclops is saying that there's an intruder. They're not sure who. And they come blasting through the door. He says, I can't tell if it's friend or foe, so we're going to assume it's trouble. And here is the return of Professor Xavier, because at this point, I think after Xavier thought half the X-Men were dead, I get my chronological X-Men confused, but I think he went to space with Lilandra. But when he felt the power, Jean's Phoenix power beginning to emerge, it scared him, and he came back. So here he is, and it says, over the years since he founded the X-Men, he has come to regard his young mutant charges, both new and old, more like his children than his students. And that's sweet, because that's how Xavier always focused on him, even though I hate what they kind of did with what he thought about Jean. That's one thing I wish writers would leave alone. That was so gross. Anyway, so when you think everything's calm and safe, here comes the oncoming storm. Wolverine's pissed. I'm no kid anymore, Summers, and I'm no flaming amateur. So where does Chrome Dome get off treat me like one? You tell Xavier what I told you, bud. Wolverine don't jump through hoops for nobody. And so Cyclops realizes that he has to kind of intervene with Xavier. And if you remember, if you go back and read the original X-Men #1, which has been reprinted, trying to get an original copy is 0 to naught. Listen to the way that Xavier treats the students, Storm, Colossus, etc., so forth. In a moment, Scott, Nightcrawler, now we'll test your agility and wall crawling abilities. Storm, your airborne maneuvers. And Colossus, your strength. Scott, notify Wolverine that his childish outbursts will cost him 10 demerits. Right here, Xavier coming back wanting to slip into the leadership role, but he doesn't realize that this isn't a team of teenagers. Lynn Wein and then Chris Claremont taking over. These are adult mutants who've gone through their adolescence, and they just want to help save people. And Cyclops basically says you can give him 10,000 demerits. He's a full-grown man. You can't treat these new members like the original 5. They're individuals. We can't mesh into the same kind of team as the original X-Men because we're not the same kind of people. Forgive my bluntness, Scott, but to me that betokens a failure of leadership on your part. This anarchy is a result of your failure to teach these mutants how to be a team. Professor, we are a team. Quiet. You're correct. I've been remiss in my duties. I have not taught the new X-Men in part because I trusted you to take that responsibility. That lapse will be speedily rectified. Cyclops is going, he's treating me like a kid again, only keeping me on a leash and only giving me so much power. Because Xavier doesn't understand. But before we can get any more into that, we're talking about coming of age. Here we see Weingart, the introduction of the Hellfire Club, and then the first appearance of the White Queen, and how they're going to use her to try to take these 2 new mutants that Xavier has found. The first one being the first appearance of Kitty Pryde. And here, she has young kid problems. Her parents want to send her off to kind of like boarding school. She doesn't want to leave Deerfield, Illinois. Her parents are in the talks of divorcing. And she's like, I hate that they want to do what they want to do and not hear what I want, and they want to send me away. And here Kitty's talking about having these massive, exploding headaches. And she goes, somebody Stop the hurting. Please make it stop. It stops just like that. Slowly, gingerly, Kitty opens her eyes. And here's the first time that Kitty manifests her powers, and she has no idea what just happened. And while all this is happening, Emma made the first move in trying to recruit her. Here comes Professor Xavier. And essentially, Xavier brings the new X-Men because he wants to see how they work in the field. So he sends them off while he talks to the parents, and she meets Storm. Now listen to the way Claremont does the introduction without like, oh my God, like two friends having like ice cream. And so a real quick change, an 8-block walk and a triple scoop, scooper duper ice cream soda later. A kid from Middle America and an African goddess are well on the way to becoming fast friends. And right there with that, you see how Kitty and Storm have that rapport, where it's almost like Storm sees her as her daughter. And that's why they've always been so close. Not, oh my God, I'm like so all eyes and like, what do I want for lunch? None of that crap. And then while we're getting into the depths of relationships here, then the action happens. And before the action, one thing I do want to point out is they're at a soda shop. And the freaking shop keeps like, this ain't no library, fella. You want to read the magazine? Buy the magazine. Now remember, this is the 70s, early 80s. Logan's sitting there at the counter reading Penthouse. How appropriate for Wolverine. Anyway, Logan wants to pick a fight with the guy. But then come these armored goons who want to take the X-Men. And a huge fight ensues. And they notice that these armored suits are able to counter all the powers, like the Storm's elementals, Colossus' strength, etc., so forth. But because they've trained with Cyclops, and Cyclops has gotten to know them as individuals instead of just like students, like Xavier sees them, they say each suit only focuses on one of their powers, so they switch enemies, and they're able to take them down. But alas, they're still beaten. How? Read the book. And then in the midst of all that, Kitty kind of says, she goes, I did it. I concentrated, and I'm walking right through this wall from the rear compartment. And that's where the book ends. Is with the X-Men in peril, and Kitty not know what to do with herself because she just manifested her mutant powers. Now to jump into the next story called Paper Not Paper. When Kitty phases for the first time, she gets tired. So when she escapes from the fight, she goes kind of into this deep sleep. She's exhausted. And so the backup story on this, the first time I read it, I didn't really feel it. But going back and reading it again, it's really, really deep. She ends up, as I just said, passing out. And I apologize, my focus is not working. But this thing is like a psychedelic mushroom trip. She's trying to read these books. And while she's trying to study, all of a sudden enters kind of the people that are tormenting her dreams, which we see Emma. And essentially what happens is in her mind, Kitty's trying to read a book about genetics by Professor Xavier. And Emma's saying, all these books are mush. You should just join me. So you see this internal struggle with all this stress that Kitty's dealing with in the real world. And while this is happening, Storm enters her dream. She goes, don't worry. Can't judge a book by its cover. And as we grow, we change. And we have to find out who we are all over again. And when we do, the fear disappears. And this right here hit me hard. She goes, and when in the service of giving to another and forgetting the self, it is in the other that the self is found. It is giving. So in her mind, this gives Kitty the strength to stand up for herself. And she has a realization of what her power is. She goes, that's it. That's my mutant power. I can pass through solid objects, which then explains how she's able to get aboard the Hellfire's hovercraft to find out that the X-Men are in peril. Guys, this book, from the original Claremont script to the backup story that was reprinted in the 90s, absolutely phenomenal. Great way of showing human traits within the pages of a book that is now timeless and the original copy is just highly sought after, compared to I'm all ears, I'm all eyes. What are we going to do for lunch? I don't know. Maybe takeout. Get out of here. We read these books because we care about the people, because they reflect situations that happen in the real world. As Stanley said, the Marvel way is the world outside your window. And this handles all social situations, internal situations, parental, and trying to grow and be your own individual. That's why this book will last for years and years to come. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please, first and foremost, if you can't afford a copy of the original 129, because that book is going up in price, see if you can't find a copy of issue Classic X-Men 35. And if you've enjoyed this review, we really would appreciate it if you take a moment to hit like, share, and subscribe. Helps the club channel more than you could possibly know. And if you don't mind hitting that fancy little X bell next to subscribe, that way as we continue to upload content, you guys will get notified. Come to the channel, and we love talking with you and hearing your thoughts and feedback down in the comments below or our social media pages, which I'll make sure to leave the links down in the description. So with all that said, thank you so much for stopping by. Hope you all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, true believers.